Good, awake, excellent. Good starting point. So I'm doing the opening remarks here. I'm not sure how loud the microphone is. Can you hear me okay? I'm quite loud anyway, so you hear me all right. I'm talking about, quickly, the overall kind of mobile payments landscape is clearly evolving very quickly. There's a lot going on. And again, I think what I want to get over the next few days or couple of days here is that it's not just about payments, because frankly, the utopia we're looking for is still quite far off. We're still looking for something beyond what is available today. And there's that startup company out in California, Apple or Pomegranate or something, because they've kind of come into the mix. Doesn't mean it's all working out yet, so there's still quite a long way to go. But yeah, I want to talk about really where are we going with payments, and if it's about being mobile, it's got to be more than being the equivalent of a credit or debit card transaction that is done at the checkout. That doesn't work. I've been doing this for a while. I've been with Javelin for a couple of years. If you're not familiar with Javelin, Javelin's a research company that does a lot of consumer research around behavior in payments. But I've actually been tracking what's happening in mobile and mobile payments for about 12 years now. So I've seen a lot of companies crash and burn, and the typical problem with them is that they try to mimic a payment transaction. They try to do something that either reinvents the wheel, they try and start a new payment network, or they simply replicate a debit or credit card in the physical world with a phone, and that's just not enough. So this utopia we're looking for is quite far beyond the actual payment transaction itself. Payments work fine in a lot of respects. So if you're measuring payments, it's by a handful of criteria. It's the speed of the transaction, it's the security of the transaction, how ubiquitous it is, and really, what's in it for the consumers and the merchants. And that's an important thing to remember. It's got to be those two constituents that are happy. So remember that. Payments are more than paying, first of all. What we have very often is the checkout experience. And again, increasingly things are getting streamlined, but you still have this problem. So you get to a checkout. You probably have to line up a few minutes to get there first. So here's a good example of a checkout line. Beyond that, you actually get to the conveyor belt. You put your goods on the conveyor belt. You see them go through. The person scans them individually. It's problematic and fairly cumbersome. And probably the shortest part of that entire transaction is where you swipe your card or you tap your phone, you put in your PIN or whatever. So the whole retail transaction is really what needs to be looked at. It's all about streamlining what's going on. And again, like I say, if the mobile component of that is just replicating what's happening already, then we've got a problem, because effectively we're just reinventing the wheel. So I always wonder this, again, why can't we have something that is far more equivalent to turnstiles, your highway toll booths? And that's something that seems to be, again, particularly problematic in some areas. Again, I've been, I've done a lot of travel. You see the turnstiles all over the highways. There's this clear demarcation. It's very obvious between the people who haven't got the savvy or they haven't looked into getting a transponder because they're like 9 cars back. And then you have the other lane that is just simply flying through. And again, I think this is a good analogy for where mobile could really help with not just the payment, but the entire retail transaction. So this is, again, I think this view of utopia. It's about streamlining not just the payment itself, but the entire experience for the consumer. And again, why this? We're back to the checkout lane. Even if it's a self-checkout lane, there's still that problem. In fact, a pet hate of mine is the self-checkout lane, because there's a very good chance that the person in front of you has no idea what they're doing. So the whole concept of self-checkout is still very problematic. These things are laid out like a yard sale. There's technology all over the place. And it's very unclear, really, what the call to action is, what you're doing. And in fact, it's more of a bottleneck than using the straightforward checkout. So again, I think mobile has a very clear role to play in fixing this kind of a problem. And again, the technology's out there. We have a multitude of technologies beyond the transaction. We have things like beacons. We have a whole variety of solutions that can actually make you check in as you turn up. And I think this is kind of, again, we talk about the Uberification of payments, and that's been seen recently. It's not really a real word yet. But again, the concept of the transaction effectively being removed from the value chain. It goes to the background. If you take an Uber, you probably have a fairly smug feeling, apart from you're turning up in a fancy car. But the entire, who's taken an Uber recently or at all? So again, I mean, I expect this audience to be fairly familiar with them, isn't that we are itinerant traveling types. And the beauty, other than you don't have to actually hail a cab, you can get a car, is that all of the payment information is in the background. And again, I think that Cupertino startup recently that announced their Mango Pay or something. What was disappointing about their announcement, as far as I was concerned, is again it was doing nothing particularly new. I mean, it was more streamlined, certainly more mainstream. There's some very interesting best practice when it came to things like the actual security setup there. But again, it was just effectively using what already exists. There was nothing new in terms of the payment rails, and nothing was done to, again, really augment the retail experience. So I think this is what we're going to start seeing, or I hope we would start seeing, in all aspects of transactions. I mean, Uber is effectively, I'd say, analogous to a payment vehicle like you go shopping. I could see this being something that transcribes over to, say, an Amazon, where you have the ability for last mile delivery, potentially by Uber, potentially by somebody else. But effectively, I think, again, if we're going to really nail mobile payments, it needs to be looking at this fusion of online and offline and pushing beyond what already exists. So it's not, as I say, reinventing payments. They work absolutely fine in most respects. Sometimes there's some friction about maybe the cost as far as merchants are concerned, or certainly there might be some issues with trust and security. But fundamentally, it's the entire retail experience that needs to be considered in its whole, and that's both online and offline, and having mobile as that bridge between the two. So with that, I mean, these are obviously my opening comments. I hope we have some very interesting sessions over the next couple of days. I personally would like to have this reality check in the background. Does this do something new for transactions? And I hope we have a very interesting and, I would like to think, provocative couple of days of discussions while we're here. So thank you very much, and I will now leave the podium.